Hello, YouTube divers. This is WaterIve122, and I want to welcome you all to another episode of Magic Metal Mondays. Today we are going to be doing another top 5 albums of the year. Last time we did 1986, and today I thought we could go back another year earlier to the year 1985, and we're going to count down my top 5 albums from that year. So, unlike 1986, where there were 4 metal albums and 1 rock album, this list is just all metal because, let's face it, there were a lot of great metal albums from 1985. And sure, you could say one of them is like hard rock, but who knows. So without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at number 5, Walls of Jericho by Helloween. Now, this was their debut album, and if you remember on my Helloween album rankings, I placed this one just slightly above middle of the pack. But that was when I wasn't crazy about Kai Hansen as a singer. But these days, Hansen has absolutely grown on me as a singer. I mean, like the song How Many Tears and Ride the Sky. Ride the Sky! I love that opening riff. It really sounds like a riff that Slayer would make. It just sounds so heavy, and Kai Hansen, in of his own self, has a phenomenal voice. He's a really great singer. Let's see. Heavy Metal is the Law, Metal Invaders, Guardians, Victim of Fate, and Cry for Freedom. I know that Cry for Freedom was technically off the Helloween EP that came out the same year. But it's basically been featured on this album as like a bonus track or something like that. It's a really cool song. But overall, Walls of Jericho, I now understand why a lot of Helloween fans adore this album. I don't really hold it in such high regard. I just prefer the other two Helloween singers, but Kai Hansen has just grown on me. And, that's the main reason why Walls of Jericho ends up here. It's a really great album. Really great way to kickstart your career. Number 4, Under Lock and Key by Dokken. Now, this is actually I believe this is like the first time that I've actually talked about Dokken on this channel. Recently, I've been listening to a lot of Dokken, especially off of the Under Lock and Key album. This is by far my favorite album from Dokken. There's so many classic songs on here. Unchain the Night is the first Dokken song I ever listened to. It was the first song I learned how to play on guitar from them. It's a really cool song. Slippin' Away is just a beautiful ballad. I love that track. In My Dreams is a classic. Will the Sun Rise, Lightning Strikes Again. There's so many great songs on this album. And it basically has its own unique standing point of Dokken's unique sound, because in my opinion, this is really the first album where Dokken sounds like Dokken. On the previous album, Tooth and Nail, they kind of sound a little bit heavy, like almost to the point where, they were going into that Motorhead, Judas Priest type of territory. But on here, they really decided to branch out, and I consider this to be their masterpiece. I know a lot of Dokken fans feel that way as well. This is a great album from start to finish. Go listen to it right now. You'll really like it. What more can I say about Under Lock and Key? It's a phenomenal album. Now, number 3 on my list. We got Hell Awaits by Slayer. I mentioned Slayer when I was talking about Walls of Jericho, that opening riff on Ride the Sky. It sounds a little bit like Slayer. And, this album is a really good example of this. I mean, on this album, Slayer finally reached their great sound. I mean, like the sound that they would be known for. They took everything that they did from their debut, Show No Mercy, which came out 2 years before, and they made it more raw, more evil, more powerful, more fast, more brutal, more. They just improved on this album they just took everything from their debut album and they made it even better here. The production is pretty freaking raw. Tom Araya has like an echo effect on the vocals, which is just creepy as I will get out. I mean, songs like the title track, and At Dawn They Sleep, really good examples of that. Necrophiliac is a phenomenal track on here as well. The point I'm trying to make here is that this is really the first classic Slayer album, and then, you know, right after this, you get Rain and Blood, which I've already talked about that on my previous videos, so, you know. Yeah, Hell Awaits, phenomenal album. Top 5 Slayer album for me. One of the best metal albums to ever been recorded. It's a great album. It's a really great album. Alright, and now we move on to number 2, Power of the Night by Sabotage. Now, I already did a whole album review for this album a couple months ago. Everything I said on that album review video that I did for Power of the Night still applies here. I still love this album. It's still a top 5 Sabotage album for me. It's a really, really great album. And like I said with Hell Awaits, this really feels like the first classic Sabotage album. It takes everything that they did on their debut album Sirens and their EP The Dungeons Are Calling, and they make it more punchy, more heavy, more technical. Chris Oliva is in his absolute element on this album. John Oliva, this album has some of my favorite vocal performances from him, specifically on the title track, Unusual, Necrophobic, I believe. Necrophiliac, I think that's the name of the song on here. Warriors and Fountain of Youth, and In the Dream, which all those songs, really this entire album, the band is just in their absolute element. This is the final album to feature the classic lineup of Sabotage with the Oliva brothers and Keith Thumper Collins on bass and Steve Wacholtz on the drums. Or should I just basically say that this would be the final album to feature Keith Collins on bass? What a way to go out. This is a solid album. A huge improvement from their debut album and their EP. This is a really, really strong album, and I love it. So with that said, Power of the Night coming in here at number 2. And finally, number 1, another one of my all-time favorite albums, released by another band from the Big Four. We are talking about Spreading the Disease by Anthrax. Now, everything that I said about Hell Awaits and Power of the Night also applies here. Anthrax took everything that they did from the previous album, Fistful of Metal, and they made it even better, like 10 times better on Spreading the Disease. Simply for the fact that this album welcomes in Joey Belladonna, who is one of my all-time favorite vocalists. And probably my favorite frontman. I mean, if you don't believe me, go watch a video of Anthrax playing a live show, and you'll see how he gets the crowd motivated. He always pokes fun with the crowd. He always interacts with the crowd. It's just such a wonderful sight to see. And this is also the welcoming of Anthrax's current bass player, Frank Bello, who, in my opinion, is one of the best metal bass players of all time. He's a great player. The guitar duo of Dan Spitz and Scott Ian are in their full element on this album, especially, and of course Charlie Benante behind the drum kit. Absolutely amazing playing from him, especially on my favorite Anthrax song, AIR, which opens up this album with a banger. Medusa, another great track. Madhouse is a classic. Armed and Dangerous is a phenomenal track in of its own self. This album really is just from top to bottom just a freaking masterpiece in thrash metal. And like I said, it's one of my all-time favorite albums by anybody. It's a great album. So with that said, that concludes this edition of Magic Metal Mondays. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is WaterApp 122 signing out, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.